Today we're going to be talking about minibars. Now, obviously, they've been around for a long time. There are a couple of different types of fridges. Now, to be honest, I don't know the differences, the pros and cons between them. I do know that some are quieter than others. Can you give us a rundown on the different types of fridges that are available and what's good and bad?
First of all, I'm going to correct you slightly in terminology. A fridge is not a minibar. Normally, when you talk about a fridge, you're talking about a domestic appliance, and fridges normally have a freezer component to them. Okay. Minibars don't have freezers, so they are designed specifically for the hotel room to keep a number of different products at a comfortable temperature or a cool temperature. So there are two technologies really. There's absorption and there's compressor. They both work the same way in as much as they take a liquid, convert it into a gas, and as it converts back from a gas to a liquid, it sucks heat out of the minibar itself. Now, absorption has no moving parts. So the actual fluids that are in there, and mainly ammonia and water, are heated up. As they're heated up, they convert it into a gas. And then as the gas passes through the diffuser, it converts itself back into a liquid and draws the heat out of the minibar.
Sounds good.
A compressor uses a liquid that it compresses, it actively compresses it down, which changes its state into a vapor. And then as it expands through the diffuser, it goes back into a fluid, drawing the heat out of the minibar. So they both do the same thing, cooling a box. It's just how they go about it.
Yeah.
Now, there are pros and cons to both. The absorption minibar seems to be the more popular in the industry, or in the hospitality industry at least. And the main argument behind going for absorption is there are no moving parts, so there is no noise, so it is 100% silent. The downside to that is, A, the gases and liquids that it uses aren't particularly good for the environment and aren't particularly good for people. So ammonia is not a good thing to be having in a guest room. The second thing is to actually get the ammonia into a gas and back again, it needs to be heated. So you have a very large heat load to the minibar. So you need very good ventilation. And where's that heat going? That heat's going into the room, so therefore you need to have the air conditioning running to fight the minibar. So on top of all of that, you've got the electricity use. Obviously you're heating something to cool something else, and then you're cooling something else to get rid of the heat that's in the room.
Yep. They're
not very efficient, but they are whisper quiet, which is really where they have a space in the market. Now, compressor technology.
Awesome fridge. I mean, how long do they normally last for?
It does depend on use, and it does depend on how the room's kept and the ventilation. Where they create a lot of heat, they also create a lot of condensation. So you tend to find an absorption minibar, if it's not installed very well, hasn't got very good ventilation, it actually corrodes at the back. And you would normally say 2 to 5 years.
Yep.
Is the sort of average you'll get for an absorption minibar, unless it's really well installed, or it's very, very accurately put into the enclosure that it's put into. When you start talking about compressor minibars, you're normally 50% longer, so you're between 5 and 10 years. They haven't got the same heat load, and the only thing that really goes wrong with them is the bearings in the motor wear out, and that's again where the noise factor comes in. So what I normally suggest to people that are looking at this, that yes, if you want a quick, relatively cheap fix, go for an absorption minibar. Yep. But be prepared, in 2 to 5 years, you're going to have to reinvest. If you go for a good quality compressor minibar, then that noise factor is reduced considerably and will last much, much longer. And actually, some of the minibars out there now have an internal timer, so you can set them to turn off between the hours of 11 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock in the morning. So when the guest is asleep in the room, they are 100% whisper quiet again, because they're physically not on. So that's really where we are with technology as to the two different types. Compressor Sorry, Brendan.
I was going to say, I suppose from a price point of view, are absorption minibars generally a little bit cheaper than compressor, or the price is the same? It's just, with, as you said, with the compressor, you're probably going to get double the life out of the unit. So
yeah, you can buy compressor minibars at the same cost as absorption minibars, but you're then buying a cheaper compressor, or you're buying a minibar that hasn't got a good seal on it, or it hasn't got a thermoplate at the back, so it doesn't hold the temperature as well. See, a compressor minibar comes on, cools very quickly, and then turns off. So that's why if you're at home, you'll hear your home refrigeration unit coming on, it rattles, and then goes quiet. Then half an hour later, it rattles again. Effectively, it's turning on and off to keep the temperature cool.
Yeah.
Absorption minibars, what they tend to do is they run continuously. They're not actually thermostatically controlled.
Right.
They just have this continual process of trying to cool the box down. So you may have noticed this, that if you ever stayed in a hotel with an absorption minibar, you open the minibar and you spend 5 minutes rummaging around, choosing what you want. What happens is the temperature rises up. So effectively the cold air falls out. And it then takes a good 2 or 3 hours to get that minibar back to a cold temperature,
Wow.
which is why absorption minibars aren't really suitable for milk or dairy products, because the temperature fluctuates up and down so much. The moment you look at a compressor minibar, you set the temperature to low, i.e. your average hotel 3 to 4 degrees, which is where most products like to sit.
Yep.
It will physically work to get to that temperature, and will do it much quicker. So going back to your question, you can buy cheap compressor minibars at the same cost as an absorption minibar, but it's going to be noisy and it's not going to be as efficient. If you pay the extra money for a good quality compressor minibar and you do your investigation as to what makes the difference, then that extra 20–30%, if that, will be more than covered in the life expectancy of the unit, the energy consumption of the unit, and the guest satisfaction of the unit.
Yeah, so it's a matter of looking at the total cost of ownership. And I presume if somebody wanted to do that, you've probably got some sort of numbers or calculations that they could run. As you said, energy consumption is a big one these days, and then the life of the unit, of course.
Yeah, look, there are industry standards with regard to consumption. And if you go into the Good Guys or Bingley or anything like that, looking at a fridge, you'll see, a star rating as to how energy efficient it is. Exactly the same applies to minibars. So any vendor you go to should be able to supply you its energy efficiency, its star rating. From that, it's then just a simple comparison as to what your running costs are and how often you want to have the capital expenditure of replacing the minibar units. Unfortunately, absorption minibars are now getting the reputation of being a consumable almost.
Right.
It's expected that you install it and 2 to 3 years later you're going to replace it and throw it away, which is absolutely atrocious to the environment.
Yep.
It's also a really inconvenience to obviously the maintenance and the operation of the hotel, because they've got to physically move these boxes in and out of the rooms.
Yep.
All for a short-term saving.
And there's probably a disposal cost, I would assume, because of the fact that, there's ammonia in it. Nobody really wants it. So you're actually paying to have it actually removed and disposed of, which, I'm in a lot of areas starting to become really expensive. So any cost that you've saved is probably eaten up by that disposal cost.
As you know, Brendan, it unfortunately tends to come out of different budgets within the hotel's springs, so it may get lost in the equation.
It's true,
but yes, it is. It's Vintech, we're always trying to be environmentally friendly in the products that we're putting into the market and how they work. So we've got energy management products, we've got various other things, and it is always painful when I know that if we're selling an absorption minibar on cost, that in 2 to 5 years it's going to end up in landfill, or it's going to end up being paid to be disposed of. I know compressor minibars do have a shelf life themselves, and they will need to be replaced as well. But they as long as you get a good compressor minibar, one of the main manufacturers of the actual compressor is Danfoss. So if you can find a minibar that's got a Danfoss compressor into it, you know that you've got something that's going to last longer than your off-the-shelf, relatively cheap OEM model.
Yep. Okay. No, that's excellent advice.